All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Today is Friday, February the 18th, and I would dare to say we have just enough news to sort of bring a end of the week Kraken forward. As you guys know, I don't normally do a Kraken if I feel like there's nothing to report on, and I have a feeling today's Kraken's going to be short, but at the same time, we'll be focusing on a lot less events, but very intense ones. So okay, before I go reading off the points, let me just make this a little bit of a unorthodox Kraken. Simply because I'm Canadian, I currently live in Canada, and it seems like all eyes are on Canada and Ukraine between the two, whether it's the truckers in Canada and all of that, or what's occurring with respects to an alleged Ukraine conflict between Russia and NATO and, the Ukraine, the whole thing there. So as a Canadian, let me just say personally, I don't, in my humble perspective, I don't agree whatsoever with what Trudeau is doing. There's a lot of people that are dissenting voices saying this is not right whatsoever. You have, for example, people putting, particularly within Ottawa, people putting their children in between them and the police so that the police don't arrest them. And yes, as of this morning, they did go out to arrest. When I say they, I'm speaking of the Ottawa police. I'm sure they called backup, something of the sort, to arrest these protesters or what have you. Now, to play devil's advocate, I am sure there are extremists in every group, just like in every aspect of life, truly. Now, I have yet to find one, honestly, and that could explain why the police chief, for those who don't know, of Ottawa, resigned just the other 2 days ago, because he didn't want to deal with this crap. And again, as a Canadian, let me just say that there is not just speculation, but personally, I have to be careful with saying here because these conversations were off the record, but spoke with some that said to me, Dave, the police force internally, not just the Ottawa police, but the other police divisions that were called in to help, they're divided in terms of a morals and ethics perspective. Why Trudeau simply just won't sit down with them? Again, I would dare to say, I know this was initially a joke, but many are speculating that it's because he's got to, pull through for the World Economic Forum. Again, it's not a conspiracy to say, and I want to say this for the sake of YouTube, that if you take a look at the most amount of members of the World Economic Forum's up-and-comers and protege, so to speak, most of them, I think the number one country of these individuals that they belong to is Canada. So we have a lot of Canadian candidates there. Please forgive me if I'm not it's at least top three at the very least. But point being, what's happening today at this very moment in Ottawa, on the border, things like that, it's tough. It's tough because I don't believe Trudeau should have enacted this what was initially called the War Measures Act. And if you put it side by side on Wikipedia, I'm saying this for YouTube, Wikipedia said this, it is identical to what happened in 1933. I'm not going to delve into details there with respects to the Reichstag, that whole thing there. So again, at least the verbal description of these acts are identical. Let me be very clear. With that being said, okay, honestly, you guys want to know my personal opinion on this? This is nuts. This is nuts. You now have crypto situations like people's crypto wallets being seized. It's gone to the extent in which if the Trudeau government wanted to, let's just say for the sake of an example, they could freeze my bank account without justification. This is what that act gives them power over. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association came out and said this is a far overreach. Every single premier of each province of Canada is against this, except for the Premier of Ontario, which is interesting because he seems like someone else that they got dirt on too. But I'm not trying to get into quote-unquote conspiracy territory. But again, just wanted to sort of address that immediately. That what's happening in this country right now, I don't mean to fearmonger, but holy crap, this is a lot. This is not just a bit much. This is much. Like extreme overreach, in my opinion. So anyways, enough of that. The first thing is that lawyers for the Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins' family released an animation showing how they alleged that Alec Baldwin fatally shot her. It's a creepy video. I looked at it. It's, there's a big debate about that. I don't want to spend too much time on, who loaded the bullet in the gun, yada, yada, this and that. But, for example, I know that Tim Dillon recently went on Alec Baldwin's podcast, and he explained himself as to why he went on and all of that. I don't know what this whole Alec Baldwin thing personally, for those that want my opinion, as an actor, as a person, I was never really a fan of the guy, which is interesting to say because I don't know. I mean, he was in Epstein's Little Black Book and all that, but I never liked him from when I was a kid. That's just me personally. He always irked me the wrong way. But The next thing is that Public Health Scotland will stop publishing data on COVID deaths and hospitalizations by vaccination status because there are, quote, significant concerns about the data being misused deliberately by anti-vax campaigners, end quote. This is according to the glasgowtimes.co.uk. Now, for the sake of YouTube, I gotta say this. I can't believe I even have to address it and give this sort of forewarning, but it could also be, we have to speculate because world governments lie so often, it's possible they're telling the truth there, but at the same time, it's also possible that they're not going to report the numbers and the data because there's evidence showing that data has been skewed to sort of favor lockdowns. Now, I'm not saying that is factual. I'm saying we have to observe these things and speculate because, again, they've lied to us so much. The next thing is that Russia has expelled the deputy U.S. ambassador. Yeah. Figured as much. Don't really see much of a shocker there. The next thing is that the website of Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs went offline. Yeah, this is, tit for tat chess game in my opinion. Apparently, internet within Ukraine is very difficult to sort of broadcast outside of the country, but I could be incorrect. Maybe things came back online at this point. There's outages all over the place. It's a proxy war in my humble perspective. The CIA or NSA's taking a jab at the Kremlin, Russia, the Kremlin's taking a jab back. It's the whole thing. The next thing is that the FBI plans to form a national cryptocurrency unit focusing on seizure of virtual assets like Bitcoin and blockchain analysis, the DOJ in the US, the Department of Justice, has announced. Interesting at the timing of this relative to what was announced, I believe, yesterday morning in Canada, which was that banks will begin to freeze accounts as the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau ordered a crackdown on the trucker protesters and its supporters. This act, as I was saying earlier a couple minutes ago, also gives the Canadian government the ability to crack down on crypto wallets. And I believe the owner or founder or creator or the one who runs the current crypto coin called KRAKEN. Oh, here we are. So excuse me. Co-founder and CEO of KRAKEN, one of the largest crypto exchanges, urges people to get their coins out of custodial wallets amid developments in Canada. He then urged to get people to use peer-to-peer to get your money out of there because he said we're going to be forced to be to have our accounts seized and records seized, and we're gonna comply. Yeah, again, you see what happens when this act is put in Canada. But bigger picture, notice how the Biden administration is doing something softer in terms of the way it appears, perception-wise, but in terms of optics. But they're doing this synchronistically, almost as if Trudeau and Biden chatted. So again, take that as you will. I'm sorry, I'm letting my opinion get in the way a little bit here, but simply because as a Canadian, again, this is with respects to what's happening, it's hitting home a little bit. So the next thing is that Hillary Clinton said, and I quote, "We must reject the big lie about the 2020 election and the cover-up of the insurrection of last January 6th, end quote. Look, to a very limited extent, I get where she's coming from, to a very limited extent. And I say that because she's got no right to pull that kind of stuff. Because again, with respects to her lying and all that, don't even get me started with Miss Clinton there, or Mrs. Clinton. Not only that, but I mean, it seems like she's also pushing back against the Durham probe, which is now finding the Clinton campaign seemingly, allegedly, I have to say that because of YouTube, allegedly colluded to, again, make it seem like Trump and the Russians were in bed together. But I'm trying to stay neutral. So again, take that as you will. I encourage you folks to do your own research on the matter. And again, if you want me to delve into it more, I will on Monday if you folks would like. The next thing is that, here we go, as of this morning, banks begin to freeze accounts as the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau ordered a crackdown on the trucker protests and its supporters. Yeah, so basically when those say, like, this act gives the ability for the government to have no explanation to arrest, seize property of any kind, digital or otherwise, physical, seize bank accounts, cut credit cards off, the whole thing. So say, for example, the Trudeau government has decided to associate me with these quote-unquote far-right extremists. They could just nick my bank account right now. Simple as that. I bet you they could probably do it to my PayPal, the whole thing. This is exactly why, in my humble perspective, this is not good. Now, to be fair, if we look at ancient scriptures, I know you might be saying, Dave, what do you mean ancient scriptures? But ancient scriptures, it seems like there have been societies in human history, in long-term human history, that have had these debates and issues. Should people be allowed to govern themselves or should they not? It's not for me to say, folks. But again, I can tell you that I think this is too much power for one government, let alone one individual. But not saying that Trudeau has the sole power, but again, ultimately, as Prime Minister, he calls the shots officially, but we can argue where he's really getting his demands from. The next thing is that sirens in Donetsk started going off after the separatist leader announced the evacuation of civilians to Russia. Again, seemingly implying this is what one would do before Russia's going to go into Ukraine, but we also have to consider the other angle of things too. Is this report entirely accurate at the same time as well? Is it possible that, this is just preparation in case Putin goes in? Doesn't necessarily mean that he will. Now, again, not to seem like I'm defending Putin, to play the other side of it as well, is it possible that NATO is actually telling the truth in some cases? Which I'm sure they have, and maybe they are, but, NATO will obviously use this type of rhetoric to say, look, the separatist leaders are sending their people to Russia, so clearly Putin's going to invade. Well, it's complicated, and I'm not trying to defend Putin, but to be fair, I'm also not trying to defend the West. So the next thing is that, Canadian police, as of this moment, start to crack down on protests in Ottawa. Yeah, this was just a handful of minutes ago. Let me see here. Meta Facebook has axed its head of, quote, global community development, end quote, after he appeared on video in an underage sex sting. Jaron Andrew Miles, 35 years old, of Palm Springs, California, allegedly sent sexually explicit texts to a 13-year-old boy and made plans for the boy to meet him at the Le Meridien Columbus Hotel. Yeah. Again, anyone ask what's with these people in positions of relative power and their pedophilia tendencies, let alone the ones at the very top, right? So again, you take that as you will. The next thing is that experts call for a new European Union approach to security in Africa. As France prepares to withdraw troops from Mali, security experts urge the European Union to develop a more people-centered approach towards security in Africa. I would be totally on board for this if it wasn't for what I think are the intentions of those at the top. Notice how it has to do with more centralization. Again, regardless of if it's US, China, you name it, having to do with more leveraging and exploiting the African nations under the guise of, more secure approaches. Do you guys see what I'm saying there? I hope that makes sense. So, the next thing is that the U.S. has now officially lifted its ban on Mexican avocado imports, the USDA says. The import shutdown was triggered by a threat made to a United States food inspector. Again, this is just my opinion, doesn't mean this is true, but the threat made to the inspector could have been coming from a cartel individual because of the fact, or someone associated with them that was paid to make that phone call and make that threat, because the cartels have now gotten into avocados. So maybe not, maybe I'm missing context. If I am, please forgive me. But the next thing is that Bolsonaro is surveying the damage as Brazil mudslides death toll climbs. At least 117 people are dead in the wake of floods and mudslides in Petrópolis after more than a month's worth of rainfall on Tuesday. Again, natural disasters, we have to then think big picture. Is this legitimate or not? Again, looking into the Patreon, we'll delve into that. But, legitimate. What I mean is legitimately natural from the planet or not. Because if not, then we're going into some interesting waters there. But I'm going to have to leave that there for the sake of this public episode and for the sake of this Kraken. The next thing is that Australia and the UK are deepening their security ties amid China worries. The two countries say there has been, quote, significant progress, end quote, in its AUKUS plan for Australia to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. Okay, fair. Again, I also say that with a little bit of hesitancy because, again, war is not the thing we should be doing whatsoever. But, I'm not going to get into that whole thing of it being a theater and a stage and continuing the duopoly of it all. We see over here, by the way, on the right-hand side for those on YouTube, Lou Elizondo, just quick little note since today's Kraken isn't going to be that long at all. Lou Elizondo said, quote, the data suggests that what happened in New Mexico was something very, very extraordinary, end quote, regarding Roswell. So, again, take that as you will, I guess. Just thought I'd throw that in there. The final thing, and again, I knew, what are we at only? 13, 14 minutes. Yeah, I knew today wasn't going to be a long Kraken. I guess that's good considering no one probably wants to spend their Friday listening to me ramble for 40 minutes anyways, at least about the news. The final thing is that Fortress Japan, it's been called a fortress because of how adamantly and strongly they've allegedly locked down, is set to announce the easing of strict border measures. Tokyo is expected to shorten its quarantine and increase the number of people allowed to enter Japan to 5,000 a day. again, as long as it's done by the legislative process and the due process of the system there, so be it. We got to be fair, just like I said when they started to lock everything down, and now that they open up, we got to be consistent, guys. Not as much as I just want them to open up. In my humble opinion, I got to remind myself we got to be consistent and attempt to be unbiased. So, with that being said, folks, thank you so very much for watching or listening. For those that are not on Patreon, you'll see a very special episode, long form episode, coming out later this evening for the public. And the members, we have a beautiful members only episode coming, and we'll catch you all very, very soon. Cheers.